the highlight for me out of any of the speakers was Jeff Nuccetelli. And unfortunately, he was the last one. It was the third day on Monday, and a lot of people had already left. So they had actually made the room smaller. But his speech to me was the most emotional. It was the most direct. We gave him clapping ovation at the end. It was really unbelievable.
I'm really sorry I missed Jeff Nuccetelli speaking because, like others, it wasn't just a case of I wanted to get home. Um, when the event was released, I think we all thought it was going to be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it would be finished on Sunday night. And
Yep.
then I booked flights, like many folks did, returning early on Monday morning. And then the agenda came out, and it was Saturday, Sunday, Monday morning.
So you missed Jeff, but you got to meet him in the background, right? You talked with him.
Yeah, done like a short interview with him, like 10 minutes, just speaking about his experience at the hearings, his thoughts on kind of the situation now and going forward. And then I got a kind of good, kind of probably half hour just chat with him, walking around the hotel. Same with Ryan Graves, spent about 45 minutes I bought Ryan a couple of drinks as a thank you
Yeah.
for kind of everything he's done. I wasn't drinking myself over the weekend, but got to chat with him for a while. And yeah, but I'm really sorry I missed Jeff because I think, am I correct to say Dylan Borland was meant to dial in remotely, but I don't think that happened.
Yeah, he wasn't there.
But yeah, again, really sorry I missed Jeff and Ia Whiteley on the last day, and James Fowler as well. James Fowler was one I was really looking forward to hearing from, and I did not get the opportunity to even see him in the hotel.
Yeah, I saw him just walking down the hall briefly and shook his hand, but then that's it. I didn't know
What
about this
was
underground tunnels. Maybe they're all sneaking around down there, the big
Well,
wigs.
I did wonder if some of them maybe were in the hotel along the way, and there was some other restaurants and stuff. But yeah, interesting. And when I say underground tunnels, folks, it's not like they're kind of dug out in dirt and secretive. They were like beautifully decorated, expensive pictures on the walls, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, really interesting. And James Fowler's talk was one that I'm sorry I missed, and I'll definitely catch up on the restream.
Soul really tries to bridge the gap between the hard science and consciousness studies. But I thought it was interesting. All of the speeches were very like by the book. No real mention of woo as much. Whitley
Mm.
Strieber did ask some questions, which I'm glad was brought up.
Yeah.
But the speeches, seemed very sanitized, if you will. But then it seemed like all of the discussions, behind the scenes were all about like consciousness, the woo, different investigations going on. Was that your take as well?
Yeah, I think they made a point, didn't they, early on? Was it evening in the opening remarks that they wanted to keep the conversation grounded, and they are at pains, I think, to say they're not dismissing the experiencer part of this conversation or story. But I know this was an issue, wasn't it? Was it from the first SOL Symposium where Whitley Strieber was meant to speak, or it was something like that, and it was removed late on. And I don't think Whitley was happy with that, and other
Mm.
folks weren't happy with that. But I do see how they're trying to pull in folks like Fabio De Masi, who's a sitting member on the European Parliament, to have a conversation which he is quite new to, and he admitted that himself, but is very much invested in. And they're trying to pull in academics and scientists and officials and politicians. And I know some folks don't like to hear it. And I've hosted multiple experiencers on my show, and I'm very much happy to have that conversation.
Um,
I'll tell you what was really interesting, a takeaway I've got from the event, and I mean this in a really good way for me anyway. I would say, and this isn't just the speakers, but high profile attendees aren't all on the same page. But for me in a positive way. Um, Person A and person B that you think might agree with each other or be pushing in the same direction, they don't all have the same ideas and don't necessarily agree with what they're doing completely. And I don't mean that in a really underhanded, nasty, secretive way, but it was like people are still individual and they have different end goals. They've got different methods and skill sets they can bring to help contribute. But if it was me and you, Chris, for example, I might be going, actually, I like what Chris does with this and this, but I don't like how he's approached this because it doesn't make sense to me. I would have done it this way, and I know other folks who agree. But then, Chris, you would have folks who agree with you and like the way you're doing things. But that was a positive for me, that you're not turning up to an event at SOL and it's almost like a cult where everyone is saying the same thing and doing the same thing. I like when people disagree and can share different opinion, because I think that's how you get real progress, as opposed to being just an echo chamber where, no, we're just going to do this and we all think this, and that's going to get us where we want to be. Because I think when you hit a dead end, or you run into issues or stonewalling, it can be very hard to pivot and move in a different direction.
Yeah, I completely agree. You had very disparate viewpoints, like Jeff Nuccetelli. Talking to him in the bar, and it was amazing getting to meet him. I'm so happy that he's out there, and I can't wait to have him on the podcast. Hopefully, he said the battle's just begun.
Hmm.
Like, that was his argument. Like, we just started. Like, everyone's saying, "Oh, it's been shut down. Disclosure Act was closed." So from him, it was, yeah, this thing just got kicked off, and now it's really going to happen. I kind of get that impression from Ryan Graves as well. Whereas other people, Carl Nell's speech seemed like opposite.
But on the Sunday, I ended up having to record with Jeff Nuccetelli and Dr. Ia Whiteley. So
Having to, yeah.
Yeah, I missed that kind of late morning session before Tim Gallaudet. I was surprised how charismatic Tim Gallaudet is, and I don't mean that disparagingly. He's very good on stage. He's got a presence. Obviously, he's very tall in stature as well, but he holds an audience. And I enjoyed, like you mentioned, Carl Svozil being funny, and I missed that.
Yeah.
Tim Gallaudet had a sense of humour in his presentation and kept bringing it back to really serious points. But yeah, linking data, maritime awareness, undersea data, patterns of UAP detection over oceans. But he had a laugh with it, and he could bring people into the conversation, and that helped the flow for me of his conversation. And yeah, urging collaboration between the Navy's ocean science community and civilian researchers. And he talked about suggesting the phenomenon crosses many domains, air, sea, and space, and that requires unified monitoring. And his message: curiosity is not weakness; it's national security done right. So the idea that you've got compartmentalization across different ways of monitoring different phenomena or the same phenomenon, but they're not all talking, they're not all collaborating, they're not all sharing data. And that's a real miss straight off the bat. And that's something that has to be fixed.
Yeah, I think it just shows the benefits of having a flag officer, on the UAP disclosure team, because I think he's the only American admiral or general actually pushing for this, or at least openly talking about disclosure. And that's what I noticed in my career in the Air Force is, from the generals, it was either a 1 or a 0. They were either just amazing people, amazing leaders, like you mentioned, could light up a room. You want to follow them, or they thought they were General Patton, and they were just tyrants. There was nothing in between when I saw as the generals. And it seemed around when I started, it was like 50-50. And then luckily, as later in my career, it was more of the great leaders you want to follow. And he was certainly among the great leader group. So admirals and generals are leaders, and they speak. They speak, and they're used to speaking in large crowds. So I wasn't surprised in the least that his talk was so engaging, charismatic. The other person is Jeff Nuccetelli, and from hearing his speech, it was the same. But he was an enlisted leader. But I could tell immediately that he was a leader, and he's used to talking in front of a lot of people, and he was a leader of security forces. So a lot of those cases, when he talked about in Vandenberg, when they were getting all these reports, like he was in charge, right? He was the enlisted member in charge who was receiving all these reports. And so he was the military enlisted leader, or at least high up, leading the troops on the ground.
Yeah.
And his speech, again, I already recommended. Definitely watch Jeff's speech, but the same thing. He's a leader, and I'm really excited that Jeff is out there, and I see him kind of really leading the whistleblowers here.